Welcome to the Upshot, Ultra World Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield. Whew, Tuesday's show was... It's a lot. It's a lot. I know it's a lot for everybody to take in. We have probably had more emails and YouTube comments and messages about this episode than anything else we've done this year. So we're going to do a little bit of follow-up on that and read a few messages from folks that came in. But we're also going to do something a little bit more lighthearted and fun for the most part today, which is to talk about our storylines of the year. We're going to start our bracket. We've got the round of 16 kicking off today, and I'm really looking forward to it, Josh.
I think it's going to be a lot of fun as well. So this is one of my favorite shows to do. The brackets, it's so much fun to arbitrarily decide which is more important.
First up, though, we are going to take a look at some of the reaction to our show on Tuesday. Today, by the way, is Thursday, December 15th. We appreciate you tuning in. First thing first, I want to take a mulligan because something that I said during the interview with Joanna Harper was incorrect. Joanna asked about whether the PDGA was doing like drug testing. And I said, well, not really, but they have a policy on this. Well, that's not really true. They're not drug testing, nor do they have a policy on this. There actually is no banned substances list in the PDGA rules right now. They don't test for anything because there is no banned substances list. Now, we all know, you're not allowed to smoke, you're not allowed to drink during a tournament round, but that's kind of as far as it goes. Like, basically, you can't do drugs during a tournament round, but otherwise there's no rules. Now, I will note that actually when they announced the subcommittee to look at the gender-based divisions, they also announced that they were looking for a medical subcommittee, which exists now, to look at the prohibited substances that they may implement in the future. So they said, quote, "The creation of this subcommittee is the first step in alignment of the PDGA with IOC policy on prohibited substances. The subcommittee will determine which of the WADA, which is the World Anti-Doping Agency, prohibited substances are most likely to unfairly enhance disc golf performance. Further steps will be determined at a future date." Historically, the PDGA has kind of looked at this as like a burdensome and too expensive to implement. But I do think that with the increasing professionalization of the tour, you do have to start to think about, like, should players be allowed to take Adderall or smoke marijuana or use steroids in a more traditional sense of sports? I would imagine that those are not going to be considered okay, and we're going to have to start to figure out how that's going to get enforced.
I agree with you there, Charlie. I really think the Disc Golf Pro Tour is where we're going to see the implementation of this policy, even if it is a PDGA-wide one. I doubt it's going to be very often at your local C tier you're going to get drug tested. It really probably is going to be at that professional level, though it is noteworthy. I believe it was Switzerland. We had some listeners email us and say that because disc golf is a part of a national sporting organization in Switzerland, they got drug tested at a tournament and they pulled the top lead card and drug tested everybody. So it does happen in other instances, but primarily, at least in the United States, and with the governing body being the PDGA, it is not a part of disc golf right now.
All right, so let's get to some of the conversation around our show from Tuesday and the new transgender woman rules. And I think I want to start by saying that I would categorize the feedback with comments and emails, tweets, etc., as relatively matching up with what we saw from the PDGA survey, which is to say that the majority, 75% or so of the comments and messages and emails, etc., have said, I like the decision from the PDGA. They did the right thing to bar transgender women from competing in the FPO division at the Elite Series and majors. Some people went further and said, they should also be barring transgender women from AM divisions as well, and not just do it at the elite level. And then there were also people who said that they were disappointed in the PDGA for making this decision and that it's not inclusive. But that was a minority of the broad strokes of people saying, I agree with what the PDGA has done. I appreciate that they stood up for what was right. This is, again, I'm broadly categorizing. Josh, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a pretty fair summary of kind of the reactions that I think we've gotten.
So let's take some comments and some emails, and we're going to read them, and we'll react some places, and we may just read some and read others. Tom says, Josh asks, why does the PDGA of all sports take what appears to be the strictest position? Given the interest all stakeholders have in growing the FPO division and attracting more female players into the sport, it would appear to be in the best interest of the PDGA to protect that division and make it most competitive for biological females. Simple question, does having players such as Natalie Ryan playing in the FPO attract more women to the sport? Josh, you want to take the next one?
Yep. Next one. It says, so Charlie knows more than everyone in the medical committee. Why isn't he in there then? It was clear that the majority agreed and wanted this outcome. Stop demonizing people for their opinion.
Because it's directly calling me out, I will say, I am not a physician. I am not a doctor, but I am somebody who knows how to read scientific studies. And I think it's not really relevant that the majority agreed and wanted this opinion when we're talking about what the medical committee presented to the board in writing. And it was a substandard document. So that is my opinion. And I'm not demonizing the medical committee for the work that they did, but or their opinions really, but the work itself was not up to par.
Correct. And people with PhD who presumably had to do a thesis at some point in their career probably should be able to write a better piece than that.
Next one comes from Kenrick. Seemed like your interview was an attempt to bring in someone credible, but it ended up sounding like a lot of opinion based in emotion and not much else. Also, you complain that this is targeting Natalie specifically, but doesn't it have to? How many transgender women would have to compete for it to be a relevant topic for you? 2, 3, 10? If one is too few for it to be addressed, then how many is required? I will just quickly note on the interview with Joanna, some other people pointed out that we didn't mention that she was a transgender woman herself. That is true. She is very credible, just to be clear.
Yeah.
This is one of the foremost experts on this topic in the world. And she's written what I would consider to be very credible research summaries. Now, she mentioned that they have forthcoming research, but she's also done research that has showed what we've seen across literature, which is that there are durable advantages for transgender women compared to cisgender women. There's a paper that she is the lead author on that says, how does hormone transition in transgender women change body composition, muscle strength, and hemoglobin? Systematic review with a focus on the implications for sport participation. And this is out of the Loughborough University. So you can go check this out for yourself if you're interested. I believe this came out this was in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. It's a highly respected journal. And I'll just pull a couple of notes from the conclusion because I think it's relevant to the entire conversation here. Certainly, Joanna is not an expert in disc golf and didn't have a lot of time to do extensive research into disc golf. So I think it's fair to say that she was, kind of just giving an opinion based on her expertise outside of the sport. But the paper basically points out that even after hormone therapy, the research that exists right now shows that transgender women retain advantages over cisgender women in strength and lean body mass and other areas. Quote, the small decrease in strength in trans women after 12 to 36 months of gender-affirming hormone therapy suggests that trans women likely retain a strength advantage over cisgender women. Whether longer duration of gender-affirming hormone therapy would yield further decrements in strength in transgender women is unknown. And later in the study, the review of the literature, it says, given that the range of physical parameters important for success varies considerably between sports, and that the physiological effects of gender-affirming hormone therapy vary in their time course, future research should be sport-specific as well as athlete-centric. Although a level playing field in sport is illusory, it is important that opportunities for women to engage in meaningful competition within the female category exist. Whether transgender and cisgender women can engage in meaningful sport even after gender-affirming hormone therapy is a highly debated question. However, before this question can be answered with any certainty, the intricacies and complexity of factors that feed into the development of high-performance athletes warrant further investigation of attributes beyond those assessed herein. It had talked about the fact that there's not much literature at all on athletes. So I think that shows you where Harper's perspective was coming from, which is that, we don't have a lot of data yet, period. We definitely don't have almost any data on athletes. And we also have limited data on long-term hormone therapy and what the effects are, because we know there's a decrease in strength. I mean, it's very clear. There's, across various categories, hemoglobin levels, which has to do with your blood oxygen content, and, endurance factors, strength. If you go through testosterone suppression, you see reductions. The question is, are those reductions enough to make it fair for trans women to compete with cis women? That, of course, is the crux of the question here. And I think Harper's point is, and I would not be surprised if Harper's research shows that among athletes, these same durable effects exist. I think she might say that it is fair for trans women not to compete in elite women's divisions of sport. I can't speak for her, but given what she said on this topic in the past, I think it is very possible that once the data actually comes in, she would feel comfortable saying that. So just some thoughts there.
I mean, she even said on our show, though, she felt like the policy that was implemented for amateurs would be a fair implementation at the FPO or at the touring level as well, and the major level. I think, Harper just seems like someone who's not only credible, but is doing the research, very well credentialed, and is interested in trying to find what is a fair solution, but one that is based in complete science once the data has been gathered, which I think the biggest point.
Yeah, I will note
it hasn't done.
There are other researchers in this space, Emma Hilton among them, who also have done literature reviews, who have found similar results, and their position is that it is unfair for trans women to compete with women, and that's the position that they have now. So Harper definitely takes more of a middle ground approach here. So just for clarity on where she's coming from.
Yeah. All right. Next one.
Let's do it.
Okay. The PDGA policy seems mean because it's different for pro players on tour versus other players in other divisions. If it was going to be fair, any policy would be the same for every division, whether they're playing for money or not.
Definitely saw this perspective a bunch. I think it's a valid perspective.
Though I gotta admit, I'm like, when you think about the stakes, so wanting someone to be able to play in amateur divisions as a recreation, I can see the reasoning of trying to allow for more inclusion at that level.
Here's one that I think had the most thumbs ups of any of the YouTube comments. Listen, guys, as far as the survey, I'm a leftist. I hang out with leftist disc golfers, and none of them think it's fair for transgender women to play in women's disc golf divisions. You yourselves don't go so far as to say you support inclusion. Having respect for both cisgender women and transgender women doesn't mean that you think it's fair for them to compete in women's divisions. This is certainly not a case of right-wing people being on one side of the argument and left-wing people being on the other. Unfortunately, a lot of the right-wing opinions are based on religion and bigotry, but many, many left-wing people are against inclusion and respect both cis and transgender women. And it's not about Natalie Ryan, it's about the whole issue. And that comes from Just Browsing.
Next comment. I do think you missed one substantive point, however, which is why is it okay to establish different participation criteria for female players at different competitive tiers? Shouldn't the definition of a divisional criteria be consistent regardless of what that definition is? Echoing that previous comment.
Here's one from a female listener that asked to remain anonymous. This was a longer email on a kind of variety of topics, but conclusion was, this issue will never be settled in a way that pleases everyone, and it's a painful and exhausting topic. But I ask you as public voices to remember who the PDGA was trying to protect with these new rules. Their decision was not just about Natalie Ryan. I believe they were acting with good intentions to protect all females of the sport when they made such a restrictive policy. And if they ask me to provide a birth certificate or even blood testing, of course I would do that, because it's a privilege to play in PDGA events. They are my governing body, and I am willing to meet the requirements they set.
Next email. You and your guest stated that based on limited studies, trans women retain about a 30% strength advantage post-transition. Then out of thin air, you threw out that within a subgroup of athletes, maybe the advantage only 12 or 2%. Like a trial lawyer trying to impeach evidence to get one's clients off, you harped on the lazy source data used of the evidence of the indisputable reality that men are bigger and have bigger wingspans with larger radius of hip rotation. I'm paraphrasing. It was a long email. Advantages associated with skeleture do not decrease due to hormones taken for 1 or 2 years. Look no further than the body types of young Schustrick, Barella, Eagle, and Gannon Burr. None of these guys are muscular at all, and yet would have probably scored in the bottom quartile in terms of bench press or push-up contests. But with their long wingspans, tremendous rotational biomechanics create world-class arm speed and drives that can exceed 600 feet, roughly 200 feet distance advantage over someone like Tatar. They argue that then going on, no amount of hormone therapy is going to change someone like Gannon's wingspan. I guess, the point here isn't that I disagree with this, like the comment on the wingspans. It's that a medical subcommittee made up of PhDs shouldn't be using Course Hero as the citation for this kind of evidence, right? Like if it's so obvious and so clear, then it shouldn't have been any problem to find scientific literature that confirms this hypothesis rather than using a college undergraduate study aid.
I think there is an element of people making assumptions about what the situation is based on their experience of watching high profile trans athletes. And I think the most likely scenario is that we're going to see the research come out on trans athletes as opposed to just sort of general population transgender women. And we are going to see durable advantages over women. And I think we are likely going to see sports organizations move towards the direction of the PDGA. That is my expectation. The question for me, this is not a settled issue right now. You just cannot argue that it is. I understand people are going to agree or disagree with the policy either way. I think everyone needs to recognize that the research is still being done right now. It's happening in real time. Mm-hmm. And I think the real question comes down to, do you feel like the PDGA shouldn't have gone so far this soon, or that they were correct to use the limited data that they have to set a policy that is on the stricter side? And that really is what it comes down to. And I think that there's reasonable, non-bigoted ways of looking at the issue on both sides. I certainly, while there have been, unfortunately, a lot of really just terrible comments that we will not read on the show today, that are just very cruel and unnecessary, there are a lot of people who have, I think, the feeling that, like, I support transgender women 100%, but I don't think it's fair for them because of the advantages that they have in the research that we do see for them to play. And I think that that's a totally valid position to hold. And I think that that's a position that like a lot of people hold, to be honest. And I think you're seeing that coming out in like the survey results, for example. So, the question is, should the PDGA have done this with, kind of what is still a little bit of lack of clarity in the science on what exactly the situation is? If you do 3 years of hormone therapy, does that make a difference? I get the argument that person is making here, Paul, that, if you take a large male frame and they transition, do they retain that skeletal advantage? Yeah, I guess. Mm-hmm. I think the thing is, like, we haven't necessarily seen, WNBA basketball players dominating on the disc golf. Like, it's about more than just that. There's more to it than that. But on the other hand, you do see, in baseball, for example, the strongest pitchers, I think I maybe said this on Tuesday, the strongest pitchers are all 6 foot plus. There's not that many really good pitchers who are short, because there are, there's levers advantages and that kind of thing. So let me just go ahead. You got anything, Josh? I can move on.
Well, I was about the next email, I think, kind of argues the exact opposite of what the previous person argued. Yeah.
And by the way, the percentages stuff, like if you actually look at the research, you're seeing that 12% number is not pulled out of thin air. The 2% number I cited was a hypothetical, what if the research comes back and says there's only a 2% advantage? What do you do then?
Right.
That's not an actual number that was being pulled from the actual science. So, okay, this one comes from Colin. Charlie postulated that if the science determines that transgender athletes have a 2% advantage over cisgender women, the PDGA are going to look foolish. I think this is a key angle, or at least thought experiment, to pursue. Regardless of gender, everyone is born with different innate abilities. Mason Ford will never have arms as long as Brody Smith. Is it fair for them to compete together? I'm going to skip a little bit. I joked on Facebook that Ezra and Eagle should be barred from competing in MPO because vegetarians clearly have an unfair strength advantage. Someone felt the need to note that vegan and vegetarian are different, and Eagle's not even vegan anymore, clearly missing the point. It was a joke, but also not really. How much of an advantage does Natalie have over Paige, Ella, Henna, etc.? Does Chloe Alice have the same advantage? Is it more or less of an advantage than Ezra or Brody have over a player with shorter arms? I don't expect Mason or Emerson to petition the PDGA about the fairness of competing with Ezra or Brody. I don't expect FPO players to try to bar Estonians from competition because there must be something in the water that gives them an unfair advantage. The uproar isn't about fairness. It's just plain bigotry. I hope Natalie is wildly successful in suing the pants off the PDGA, which will probably set the sport back, but maybe it's what we deserve.
Last one is a little bit more lighthearted, and I'm gonna offer an invitation here. Jake says L take on AB, Josh. He's going to win an Elite Series this year. Guaranteed. Just played 2 Arizona tournaments with him, and he averaged over 1070 for 6 rounds. That is an impressive feat, right? I don't care what tournament you're
at.
But guaranteed.
Freezing cold Jake, takes. Take note. Put it in the book.
I'm assuming, Jake, that you probably are in Arizona. I don't make it down there very often, but if we are ever in the same state, I am inviting you to a bet right now. I will take the under on half a Elite Series on Anthony Barella winning this
Wow,
season.
Okay, so Josh is putting his name in the book too.
I am. I'll buy you a drink, your drink of choice. You tell me where when we are in the same city sometime. I just don't think AB is going to win a tournament this year.
I don't know where I fall on this one. I think I would take the under just based on history, but I think it's possible that he could win. I mean, he has been playing some of his best disc golf the last couple of months. And
he absolutely is. It helps when you play a lot of golf in Arizona, though.
The thing is, him balling out in Arizona with no cameras and no gallery and just him is a different beast than when he's on the lead card at an Elite Series event and his putter dies.
Yeah.
Sorry.
He's also, he's shot 1090 rounds at the Memorial before and the Shelly Sharp Invitational. Like this is classic AB. You kill it in Arizona. Yeah,
we're getting off topic.
Take that bet. We are.
Last note on the transgender issue. The board minutes were released from the PDGA. The board voted 4-3 to approve the new gender guidelines. Nate Heinold, Wilbur Wallace, David Schreff, and Jeff Hungerford voted for it. Leah Sinigini, Laura Nagtigal, and Conrad Damon voted against it. Interesting note, the votes who voted against, those are all the newest board members, as far as I know. So something to keep in mind. This is clearly a divisive issue, not only for the players and the general population of disc golfers, but also for the board members. So it's just a difficult topic, folks. And we appreciate you listening. And I'm sorry, I think we lost a couple listeners if I was reading the YouTube comments correctly, and hopefully they can return to us in the future. So I think a few people have pointed out that, Josh, you and I didn't really come down on where we stand on the issue and like what should the PDGA have done. I still think it's difficult. You know, I think it's a difficult topic for the board to have to tackle. I don't envy them. I think, having thought about it for a few days, I am not sure that I would have gone quite as far as the PDGA because of the lack of data. I'm not sure that I feel like there's quite enough research on the topic to feel like you can say with certainty that you're right and that the transgender women have an unfair advantage. Whether I will feel that way in 6 months, I don't know. But I think the preponderance of evidence at this moment does suggest that it's true. And I think that there's an argument to be made that it sort of like, quote unquote, passes the eye test. But that's not a standard on which I would want to make a policy. And so that's probably where I stand right now. But I don't think that, there's all these conspiracy theories about PDGA this, evil, whatever. No, I mean, I think we have to continue to think about the topic, but I don't think that this was malicious from the PDGA board side of things. I think that it's just a really difficult topic, and it depends on kind of what you value and how much you trust the evidence that exists right now.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add is that when you create policies that are this black and white, really, I mean, very, very strict, the nanomoles, what's that unit name?
Yeah, nanomoles.
Nanomoles, thank you. The when your testosterone nanomoles limit is below the average range of a cisgender woman, with the kind of process that I feel like was done to get there, I think that's my biggest problem with this. The policy is really in the process by which we got here, the subcommittee, etc. And then to come to, as you said, Charlie, with the kind of limited evidence, a very, very strict policy. And that's probably my biggest critique of this process.
Okay, let's move on. Evelina Salonen was recently on a Finnish podcast and did an extensive interview. And there's a nice English translation over on Reddit's r Disc Golf. And there's been some discussion of this because one of the things that she talked about at one point was that she was upset because at Texas State's, she claims that Holly Finley and Missy Gannon complained about the course being too long, and they changed the course to make it shorter 1 or 2 days before the competition started. And, it's like, ooh, drama. Holly Finley then clapped back on Reddit, and there's been some buzz about this. I got to be honest with you. I don't know what happened here. What I do know is that the Texas State's FPO layout was slapped together late. The whole layout itself was slapped together late. And then when people actually showed up and played it, it may have just been really poorly designed. And this tournament is not coming back on the Elite Series. I don't think that this was probably the worst course of the year. I understand Evelina's complaint, assuming that it is true, which it may not be. I think that, there's a balance between having long holes that allow a player like Evelina to succeed and courses that are just too short. And that was certainly a big criticism, remember, of the U.S. women's, because you had a lot of, sub 350 foot par threes and things of the sort. So, whatever. I mean,
the moral of this story is don't try and slap together DGPT elite events the week before.
Yes.
Whatever division, by whatever metrics you choose to make the course, don't throw a safari layout together out in a park somewhere next to a baseball field less than 10 days before a professional event. That moral of the story.
More interesting, though, Josh, for me.
Yes.
There is now going to be a Finnish national disc golf team. And she talks about this extensively in here, that it came together this fall. and they're going to have access to nutritionists, trainers, like throwing technique folks, mental, like psychological coaches. And she is taking her off-season training far more seriously than she has in the past, where she primarily in the wintertime was playing paddle and floorball, other sports, playing great, obviously, super athletic, but is now going to be playing less of that and focusing more on disc golf. And she talks a bunch about that. What do you think of this concept overall of having the sort of the national organization of disc golf in Finland supporting their top athletes this way?
Brilliant. It's exactly the kind of recognition, especially in European countries where disc golf is as big as it is per capita, that those countries should be doing. I wish there was more support for players here in the United States for that kind of thing. But it's so smart because it, number one, is about inter-European competition, European Pro Tour and other European events that gain notoriety among, European countries who all take this sport as, equally seriously. But it also plays a really big deal in players' ability to compete here in the United States as well. And don't forget, there are disc companies that are Finnish, that are European. There is a market for European disc golf, and the better that those European and Finnish athletes play, the more success, fame, and revenue that brings in to Finnish markets. I think it's a brilliant move, and with that kind of support, I don't know how much of it is a substitute for top-level competition, but I could see an argument as to this could be the bridge necessary for Finnish athletes. Henna and Evelina are already top tier. They are some of the best disc golfers, minus their putting, that are in the FPO division. But on the MPO side, I could very realistically see guys who are 20 to 30 ranked right now be making a jump up to the top 10 with the support of a national sports infrastructure.
She said, quote, and I'm quoting in the English translation, so it's not exactly a quote. It is true that I've been a pro for a long time, but I have not lived like a professional, nor have I trained disc golf as a professional should. There has not been a single winter that I would have lived or trained, quote, disc golf first. I have concentrated the actual season to disc golf, but off season, I have almost forgotten it, even on purpose, because I felt like I wanted to get a break from disc golf. She also talked about her putting a bunch and how, it's just been a mental struggle, but she's starting to work on it. She's starting to accept that, she's going to have to make changes and it might take time, but clearly there's just much more of an emphasis on overall improvement as an athlete and as a disc golfer. And that should be scary for the rest of the division.
Evelina, without even trying, throws better than anybody else in the division. And now she's actually going to try.
Okay, before we get to our storylines bracket, one last thing. I have a trivia question for you, Josh.
Okay.
We just released the first installment of the Fandom survey results that we did in collaboration with Statmando over on the website, discgolf.ultraworld.com. And this first edition focuses just on a simple thing. Who is your favorite player? So, Josh, I want you to try to guess who is the number one player on average for fans. They had to vote from 1 to 10, 1 being absolutely hate them, root against them, want them to lose, 10 being this is my favorite player on the planet, I really want to see them succeed. Who had the highest average rating?
I'm trying to remember because I did this survey. Did everyone have to fill out a number for all the listed players?
I think so. I don't remember if it was required or not, but it was kind of like this core piece of the survey.
Okay. I'm going to go with Eagle.
It's not a bad guess. He's up there, but he's not number one. Okay. A player that is quite popular that you might think would be number one, a fellow Crush boy, Simon Lizotte, is not number one.
He's not?
He's not.
Oh, I totally thought you were about to tell me the fellow Crush boy was number one.
He is not number one.
Whoa.
One more shot at it.
I'm going to say Paul.
It's not Paul.
It's Paul. Yeah. He's too good to
The
be
correct
favorite.
answer, yeah, Paul has haters.
Yeah, absolutely.
The correct answer is Kristen Tatar, who is the only player to average above a 9 and has almost nobody that voted her below 5.
Wow.
So that is the number one player in fans' minds. That's pretty amazing. I mean, the combination. Let me just leave it at this. We're going to talk about this more, and we're going to do more trivia and get deeper into this conversation in our subscriber bonus segment. So join up, get a subscription. It's less than $4 a month, and you can catch all of our sub bonus segments. It's a great time, by the way, to buy an annual plan. You save 20%, and you'll get all of our Rapid React shows next year, and you can get in before any price increases in 2023. So the way to subscribe is to go to discgolf.ultiworld.com/subscribe and sign up for that and more subscriber exclusive benefits. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're doing the round of 16 in our storylines bracket. Don't go anywhere. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport, and you can save right now through December 23rd, 10% off. Just use coupon code UPSHOT, and you can save on limited edition Carltons, limited edition Octothorpes, deluxe Octothorpes, ambassador Octothorpes, deluxe limited edition Octahulls. Tons of products on sale. That does not include the new Rufus, but you can get yourself a deluxe Rufus if you're interested, because they're available now. But save on almost everything else. Again, use code UPSHOT at pounddiscgolf.com. The sale ends December 23rd. So get yourself a gift or get a loved one a gift for the holidays. Welcome back to the Upshot. Sorry, I'm like smacking my lips over here because I'm just eating some soup in our intermission. A little winter root vegetable soup. Nice at this time of year. We're about to get a real cold snap, Josh. I don't know if you saw
really?
this.
I did.
Oh, yeah. Like average temperatures are going to be 20 or 30 degrees below normal.
Oh, I thought you meant below zero.
Polar vortex is coming.
What's below normal? Are you talking like 10, 15 degrees? Or
Well, okay,
zero?
so I don't know what the temperatures are in Idaho. They're probably cold. But think of like an average winter day at this time of year, and then subtract 20 to 30 degrees.
Okay. I mean, that's cold. Yeah, that's cold. I remember in Helena one time I went skiing, and like freezing cold day. It was night skiing, and some clown took his glove off to take a picture of something, and I was like, "What are you doing, man?" I look, he's taking a picture of the thermometer. It's 35 below up on the mountain. So,
did I tell you already? I'm coming to Sun Valley.
You didn't. You might have mentioned it. I don't remember when though.
First week of January.
Where are you flying into?
Sun Valley.
You're flying into Sun Valley?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, dang it. I'm in California the first week of January.
No, I was like, maybe you could drive out.
I would have. I totally would have. Speaking of, anyway, I've got some vacations planned. I need some people to hook me up. League near Disneyland, Tuesday night, 4:30 to 6:30 at a golf course in California. I read it on UDisc. I need some help. Anyway.
Okay. Somebody will reach out. Get at us, upshot at ultiworld.com. All right, so it is time for our storylines of the year bracket. Here we go. We've got 16 storylines seeded and in the bracket. Mm-hmm. We're going to do round 1 today. And then next week, we will do the quarters, semis, and finals. So I'm just going to give you the seeds in order, and then we'll look at the matchups individually, and we'll make our picks, and we will move along. Here we go. Your top storylines of the year, starting at number 16, documentary films about disc golf. We had multiple this year. So lots of exciting stories, Fierce and The Holy Shot. Just more filmmaking happening in disc golf. Number 15 is Paige winning her 17th major championship this year. She got a pair. Number 14, Disc Golf Network breaks 40,000 subscribers, hits the 40K mark. Number 13, Nico Locastro getting suspended at the European Open for his This is such a big one that it doesn't even go in our gaffs bracket. I mean, it will be in that one too, I'm sure, but it gets a spot in the main bracket. Number 12 is Eagle McMahon getting hurt, missing a lot of the season, but also having some success with his amazing European Open victory over Macbeth. Number 11, the emergence of new manufacturers. We've seen so many new disc companies coming into the limelight. Some of them started prior to 2022, but it really feels like this is the year that they've kind of emerged in a meaningful way on the scene. Number 10, the return of the Europeans to the tour. That's a broad topic, but there's a lot of European players who really came out in force this year for the first time in 3 years. Number 9, the resurgence of Simon Lizotte. What a year he had. Number 8, Latitude 64 acquiring Castoplast and getting bought, essentially, major investment from a hedge fund, a private equity firm. So this kind of a combination, just like Latitude 64's business moves and what it means for the future of disc manufacturers. Number 7, the contracts handed out by Dynamic Discs to Ricky and Kona. Number 6, Paul getting his 6th. Of course, this has to be number 6. Paul gets 6, his 6th world championship. Number 5, Kristen Tatar's dominance this season in the FPO division. Number 4, the transgender rule changes. That's a fresh one, but it's going to be in the top 5. Now we get to our podium and the seedings. Number 3 is the Pro Tour selling its post-production rights to Jomez for 2 years for $500,000 and what that means going forward. Number 2, the creation of the Champions Cup, a 4th major for the PDGA, and it will stay in WR Jackson, and just what it means to have a 4 major calendar and regularity there. And finally, number 1, it feels like this was a long time ago, and in some ways it was, the tour consolidation. The national tour stepping aside, the Disc Golf Pro Tour becoming the official Pro Tour of the PDGA, the PDGA taking a small ownership stake in the Pro Tour, and DGPT really taking over after years where it seemed like that was never going to happen. So those are your seeds, and it's time to dump into our first matchup. We'll start at the top. Number 1 versus number 16. That's the tour consolidation versus documentary films about disc golf. Josh, go for it.
Yeah, I really think while documentary films was an important part of this year, tour consolidation is a number 1 seed for a reason. It is cementing the importance of the Disc Golf Pro Tour as the elite tour, and I just don't think there's going to be a 16 seed upset in our bracket this year.
You know, it's pretty rare in the NCAA tournament, and it's pretty rare here as well. I mean, I think it's nice to be able to shout out these films because I think that they were cool. You know, if one of them had ended up on Netflix and been some kind of like craze, you know, nationally, and people were watching this and we're getting more fans, we might have a different story here. But that hasn't happened yet. So I think we just have to go ahead and pencil number 1 into the quarterfinals.
All right, Charlie, what about the 8-9?
Well, why don't you give it to us?
Oh, okay. Number 8, Latitude 64, the kind of what that means for the future of disc golf business. Number 9, the resurgence of Simon.
Ooh, that's a tough one, honestly. Obviously, I think if you look forward, the Latitude 64 story will have more permanence.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that, you know, Latitude is now going to try to establish itself more in the United States. They're, you know, quickly getting bigger in Europe. They're buying competitors. They already do so much of the creation of plastic. I mean, they're partnered with Dynamic Discs. They own Westside. They are clearly heavily partnered with Discmania. We may not know the details there, but like they're involved in Discmania's production. So there's a lot going on there. But I have to say, I think my vote, Josh, is for the resurgence of Simon as the bigger story this year. it just doesn't happen so often that you have somebody who's kind of fallen off a little bit, not only come back and win. It's not like Tiger Woods won the Masters a couple years ago. Like, he came back and was like really good and was in the Player of the Year conversation. And not only that, he's one of the most popular players on tour. We saw that in our Fandom survey. I think that there's just a lot of reasons that feels like it's just going to be something that we really remember about 2022. And to be honest with you, the Latitude 64 stuff, I'm nerdy about the business side of disc golf. I think a lot of people probably don't even really care at all.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that vote. The other thing I would add to it is just that, you know, I make the comment regularly about Ricky and his 4 or 5 wins this season, and how I don't think it's going to be a big topic of conversation in 2 to 3 years. This season is going to be a part of Simon's storyline. When we go back and look at Simon as a player and his career, this season is going to be a defining season in his career. And Simon is one of the more influential players in terms of the rising of fans and spectators as disc golf is a spectator sport. And Simon is going to be a big part of that.
All right, so it will move on, and we'll take on tour consolidation in round 2. The 5-12 matchup is Kristen Tatar's dominance versus Eagle McMahon, his injury, and his European Open win.
This one's tough because I think it also is a little bit dependent on next season as well, right? Because if Eagle's just injured again next season, I think this 12 seed could kind of go away in anonymity. If it's kind of a blip in Eagle's career and then he goes on to incredible success, it may not be. It may hold a little more prominent part. But this season is going to be remembered as Kristen's season. There were, you know, Macbeth's 6X, there was Eagle, there was so many other, you know, competitors and compelling competition. But I mean, 2022 belongs to Kristen Tatar. And so I give the win to Kristen at the number 5 seed.
I'm with you. I think the Eagle storyline is very cool, but Kristen was the story of the year in many ways from a competition standpoint. And, you know, I think when you look at the other stuff ahead of her in the bracket, it's all stuff that was not competition based.
Yeah.
But you know, I think she's going to have a good chance to win the whole thing. We'll have to see how it breaks down in the bracket. But for me, it's just she was too good. It was too much of the conversation the whole year. And really, Eagle was not a major topic of conversation outside of that European Open weekend, which, by the way, was amazing.
Amazing weekend.
Kristen Tatar was amazing at Worlds.
Yes, she was. Yep. All right. So next up, in the number 4 seed, we have the transgender rule change. Very recent, very fresh, but definitely going to be something that's remembered from this season. Number 13 seed, Nico Lacastro and his suspension.
Well, you know, I think that there are topics perhaps that Nico's suspension could have beaten out. I mean, it was obviously a huge story from the year, but it just isn't going to be able to beat out this transgender topic. It's just not. I mean, This is not only one of the biggest stories of the year, period, already, but it's also going to be a story moving forward. I mean, we may have a lawsuit. Mm-hmm. There may be people revisiting this. You know, as board members change over, does the board try to look at this again in the future? There's a lot going on here that this is not going to just totally go away, and it's just too. Because it's such a huge culture war topic in the United States, and really, you know, I can't really speak to the rest of the world, but it just has like a resonance that the Nico thing, it just feels like Nico finally got what was coming to him in some ways because of the way that he's behaved on the course historically. And, you know, I don't think it's won him any fans, but it just doesn't feel like it's got the same kind of heft as this transgender topic.
Completely agree. Yeah, I really don't even have that much to add. I think
perhaps we will have a disagreement somewhere along the way, but first round, it's a lot of times it feels lopsided. All right, number 3, the Pro Tour sells the post pro rights for $500K to Jomez. Number 14, DGN breaks 40,000 subscriber mark. Ooh, an interesting matchup here at the 3 and 14.
The media matchup. I think the 40K subs is a really big deal when it comes to revenue stream, profitability, and long-term viability of the Disc Golf Network and live disc golf, and what that means for the Disc Golf Pro Tour as being their primary revenue stream. That being said, I think that the Pro Tour selling post-production rights to Jomez may even be underseeded a little bit at the 3 seed. I think this fundamentally changes the way that media companies will be engaging with the Pro Tour and the way people will thus be engaging with media companies. This was the first step in what I think is going to be a very long process of finding the balancing act between media companies and conglomerates that may not even be decided in the future. I mean, that vying for media rights is also not something that's settled even in other sports. Think about Amazon now broadcasting Thursday Night Football and buying the rights to Thursday Night Football. This is not going to just go away, but it is a first big step in the way that these media companies are going to be engaging with each other. So I give it the number 3, and I think has the possibility to win the entire bracket.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to give you the opposite take. All right. Okay. And then we'll have to decide who's going to win. But I think there's an argument to be made that DGN's success, continued growth is a bigger story from the year because of what it means about post-production in the future. What are we going to see? Are we going to continue to see the final rounds live for free on YouTube? Are we going to continue to see next day post-production available? Or is the Pro Tour going to consolidate and say, wait a minute, we can get to 60,000 subscribers if we simply do not let Jomez post the final round coverage the next morning at 8 a.m.? And that is an incredibly important conversation that is, I'm sure, already happening. Jomez, I've talked to Jonathan Gomez about this, and I think we had him on the show, and it was like, we don't really know what's going to happen after 2 years. And so I think it's not so much that the 40,000 subscriber mark is meaningful so much in and of itself. It's about the fact that it's continuing to get bigger, the fact that this is by, the biggest revenue stream that the tour has, and what that could mean for post-pro in the future. I don't think we're going to see post-production go away. YouTube is an incredible sort of portal for people to find their way into the ecosystem of disc golf, but we could see the Pro Tour want to put it on its own channel. We could see them say, Jomez, you can post, but you have to wait 72 hours or you have to wait a week. And what will that do to the market for that? It could crater the market for that, but it would increase the value of live. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think that this is arguably the bigger story because of what it means for the way we consume the sport. So we're on opposite sides here. What do you say?
We are. I think that my argument probably, I stick with my side largely because those decisions that you're talking about are framed around contracts and moves like the selling post-production rights to Jomez, right? You could have made the exact same argument if this was put up against last year's Disc Golf Network breaks 25K subscribers.
That's true.
Right. You're right. That increased growth is, but this was the first real step that we've seen to say Disc Golf Network is going to consolidate and control media rights around its property and its product. So I think you make a compelling point. I still think the 3 seed should win out in this one, though.
I'm going to give it to you.
Okay.
I'm going to give it to you. Okay. Next matchup. Who reads it? I forget. Is it yours?
I think
it's yours. Yeah. You got it.
All right. The 6 seed, Paul gets 6 times in the World Championships. 11 seed is the emergence of new manufacturers.
It's amazing that Paul has won 6 World Championships. Got to tip your cap. It's it's a remarkable achievement. The way that he won it this year was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the emergence of new manufacturers feels like a bigger overall deal to me from this year, because not only do we now have these companies, Mint and Lone Star and Clash, starting to sponsor players and like become a part of the conversation, but it also just shows you how massive this industry is getting. Mm-hmm. And is 6X so meaningful on its own? It's like an amazing number. I think this is the year he tied Climo or passed Climo for the most.
I think it was tied.
Yeah. Most majors, and that's a milestone we could talk about too. But I just don't know that the 6th title itself, it's not the most. Climo's got the most. Mm-hmm. And so it's impressive. It shows you a lot about Paul, but it's not, we have now, it feels like 4 or 5 companies that have emerged within the last 2 years that I feel like they actually matter. It's not just like some tiny brand that, you can buy on Infinite Discs or something. Like, no, it's like they're sponsoring professional players.
Yeah. I was thinking we were going to disagree on this one, and I was like, oh, nice. Like, this will be another disagree. But I agree with you on the importance of the new manufacturers. The other thing that it really does, it's kind of funny because it juxtaposes Paul McBeth, the $10 million contract, and his importance to the marketing value of Discraft against the durability test of the sport's largest manufacturers with new, fresh companies and their goal to recruit talent in order to try and break into that market. So like last year, Paul McBeth is going to fall short to a smaller manufacturer. Remember, Paul's 10-year, $10 million contract lost to the Holy Shot. Looks like it's going to lose again.
Holy smokes. Those were crazy stories.
Those were crazy stories.
Well, I'll just tease it now. Our subscriber bonus segment next week, we're going to put the the finalists of this year's bracket up against the finalists of last year's bracket. We might do semis and semis. We'll see. And then play them out in a combo bracket from the 2020s.
If you haven't gotten your annual subscription, go get it before that one. It's going to be fun.
All right, next up, 7 is the DD contracts, and number 10 is the return of the Europeans to the U.S. Tour.
The DD contracts were 1 year too late and 1 player short of being successful enough to take this matchup. Paul McBeth's contract is bigger. It was splashier, and it was first. And so it kind of has a little bit more weight in my mind than Ricky's when it comes to a storyline. And maybe if Kona had also come over from Innova and then just like had Kristen's season, right? Imagine if Kona played like Kristen this season and Ricky did what he did.
Would have been epic.
Probably a higher than 7 seed even. And for sure wins this matchup, in my opinion. But when I think of the return of the Europeans and the return of the European Open, I think that adds a little bit of weight to this. The European Open is...
You don't get to just throw the European Open.
Why not? Here. Why not? It says our notes say return of the Euros. So
you're not wrong.
Can I include Greek food in there, like a delicious sandwich? Like, if so, maybe make this the 1 seed. But the return of the Europeans returns the globalization of the sport, the eyes from a European market that's very enthusiastic, engaged, and brings with it some of the top talent in both divisions, especially on the FPO side. So I give it to the return of the Euros.
I am with you here. I think it's just it's European disc golf is starting to really matter. We're having players that are obviously like at the top of the division in FPO and like increasingly competitive in MPO. And it just feels like we didn't have a true like global disc golf tour since 2019. And so many more players came and played significant tournaments in the US this year. The DD contracts, big news, splashy move by DD. They shored up some weaknesses for sure. But it's been a mixed bag. Let's be honest. The Kona situation has been tough for them. Obviously, Valerie Mondahano has been a huge winner for them. Ricky has the San Francisco Giants just signed Carlos Correa. Signing Ricky is like signing Carlos Correa. You know what you're going to get, and you get production, and the guy's a beast. Okay, I'm just always going to make it about my teams. I'm sorry. This is who I am.
So
49ers can clinch tonight, by the way.
What you're saying is that DD signed Carlos Carrera and Russell Wilson. That's what I'm hearing.
Oh no,
we're including both our teams.
That's too harsh. I still have this stupid Broncos thing on my phone. Okay, so yes, I'm with you on number 10. Let's go to the last one.
Last one up. Champions Cup inaugural year and staying at WR Jackson versus Paige wins 17th major.
Well, this is actually kind of tougher than I was expecting for the 215 seed. Some people right now are trying to be like, oh, Kristen's a better historical player than Paige. I'm like, no. Paige is the best player who's ever played an FPO. Mm-hmm. Maybe Kristen can get there someday with continued dominance. But let's not forget, Paige won 2 majors this year, okay? She did not have the season that Kristen did. There's no question about it. But she was easily the number 2 player, and she's been the top player almost every season for a decade or more. And so her getting to 17, I mean, this is a record in FPO. It may never be broken. And it's going up against this structural change to the tour, adding a springtime major, which is just so crucial, at this beautiful property at the PDGA's headquarters. A fantastic wooded course that's just so much fun to watch. And, it makes the schedule feel like the other big sports, the golf, the tennis, the other big individual sports. We now have this normalized schedule. It is so nice to have that. I'm going to go to my fallback position, which is, what is the thing that I'm going to remember more about the year? Mm-hmm. And the fact is, I'm going to remember the Champions Cup first thing. And they almost borked it. Remember, they had this wacky match play combo thing. And people were so mad that they got rid of all that. And thank God, because it would have been so annoying if that's how that's played out. But they didn't do that. And it was a great tournament. I think that because this is the year that we go to the 4 majors format, I feel like I'm going to remember that more than Paige winning 2 majors, because this was Kristen's year. Yeah. Even though Paige got to 17, but it was just an inevitability for Paige in some ways. I don't know. Maybe that's unfair because this expectations bar is so high for Paige. But I'm gonna say Champions Cup, but it's close. It's close.
The other thing I would add, I think it is close. If Paige retired tomorrow, that probably, this 17th major in this season becomes more significant. She's probably going to get 18 next year, right? And then she's going to get 19, and then she's going to get 20. And when she does retire and makes the Hall of Fame, you're not going to remember the year that she broke 17. You're going to remember what her final count was, her last major, her tour at the end of her career. Those are the things that are going to be talked about. And I just don't feel like this season, because of Kristen's dominance, is going to center around Paige and that major. Had Paige been as dominant as Kristen this year and overtaken then that major count, I really think she stood a chance. But unfortunately, as she did so many times this season, Kristen takes the dub away from Paige. And it's funny, but we're giving it to Champions Cup where Paige did beat
Kristen.
Paige
beat Kristen after a brutal mistake.
Yeah, so Paige's win at Champions Cup is not enough to help her propel her over the tournament itself.
Well, but we could put it this way: Paige gets a small victory here because the way that tournament ended in FPO is part of the reason Champions Cup was such a wild tournament.
True,
and part of the reason that it's going to move on past her at the time. What was her 16th major?
Yeah, so there it is. That's our
levels to it.
That's our round 1 of storyline brackets.
Round 2 and the semis and the finals will come on next Tuesday's show. Your matchups in round 2: Tour Consolidation versus the Resurgence of Simon Lizotte, Kristen Zattar's dominance versus the transgender rule change. Pro Tour selling the post-pro rights to Jomez versus the emergence of new manufacturers, and the return of the Europeans versus the Champions Cup and the fourth major establishment. So there you go. Storylines continue on Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood saying so long, and we'll talk to you next week.